Hello, bruvs. We're back with Alraune by Heinz Ewers, a 1929 translation of his earlier, I guess you could call it a classic. I don't know if it's considered a classic. It was translated by S. Guy Endore and illustrated by Malon Blaine. We are on chapter 8, and let's go. Chapter 8, wherein is made clear how Alraune became mistress of the 10 Brinken household. When Alraune returned to the house on the Rhine, sacred to the holy Nepomuk, the privy councillor was 67 years old, but that was only his calendar age, for not the slightest weakness, not the tiniest pain reminded him of it. He felt warm and sunny in his old village, which the ever lengthening fingers of the city threatened to seize. He felt like a plump, well fed spider sitting in the center of his net, contemplating with pleasure the strong lines of his power and influence that stretched out in every direction. It pleased him to think of Alrauna's approaching arrival. She would be a welcome plaything for his whims. Moreover, she would be a gay bait, and with her help he counted on drawing into his net some additional stupid flies and moths. Alraune arrived, and on first impression seemed scarcely to have changed from the child the old man remembered. As she sat before him in the library, he studied her carefully, but, but, and I can't turn a page, but could find no trace reminiscent of either her father or mother. The young girl was small and graceful, thin, narrow chested, and undeveloped. Her figure was still that of a boy, and so likewise were her quick and rather awkward, sharp movements. She might be mistaken for a doll, except that her head was not a doll's head. Her cheekbones protruded slightly, and her thin, pale lips revealed miniature teeth, but her thick hair grew luxuriously, fell in heavy, chestnut brown curls over her shoulders. It wasn't red like her mother's, no, it was like Frau Josepha Gontram's hair. The privy councillor thought suddenly, and it occurred to him, that it was in the Gontrams' house that the idea of Alraune had been conceived. He examined her critically out of the corner of his eye, as though she were a picture, while his mind sought for other recollections in her features. Hello, bruvs. Yes, her eyes, of course, they opened wide beneath thin, sharp eyebrows that protruded out of a narrow, smooth forehead. Their expression was now bold and ironic, now soft and far away, and the little pupils were green as grass and hard as steel, just like those of his nephew, Frank Braun. The professor stuck out his lower lip. The discovery of this striking similarity did not please him overmuch. Then he shrugged his shoulders. After all, the fellow had thought of her first. Why shouldn't he have his little share in her? It wasn't much, and the price had been enormous. The quiet girl had done him out of many fat millions. You have bright eyes, he said. She merely nodded. And your hair is very beautiful, he continued. Wolfchen's mother had just such hair. Then Alraune answered, I'm going to cut it off. The privy councillor spoke sharply. No, you shan't. I forbid it. Do you hear? But at the evening meal she appeared with her hair bobbed. She looked like a page with the short curls surrounding her head. What did you do to your hair? He exclaimed angrily. Calmly, she showed him a large cardboard box. There it is, she said, pointing to the yard-long strands. He began, so you cut it off anyhow. Did you do it for spite? Just because I forbade it? Alraune smiled. Not at all. I would have done it in any case. Why? He inquired. In reply, she took 7 long strands of hair out of the box. Each strand had been carefully tied with a gold ribbon, and fastened to each ribbon was a card bearing a name. There were Emma, Margaret, Louise, Evelyn, Anna, Maud, and Andrea. I should read that whole section again. I don't know what got cut off. In reply, she took 7 long strands of hair out of the box. Each strand had been carefully tied with a gold ribbon, and fastened to each ribbon was a card bearing a name. There were Emma, Margaret, Louise, Evelyn, Anna, Maud, and Andrea. Those are your friends from school, said the privy councillor, and I suppose you, like a fool, have cut off your hair in order to send them each a memento. He was angry to find a strain of the soft and giddy schoolgirl in her. He had pictured her colder and more mature. Right. She looked at him innocently. No, she said, they are perfectly indifferent to me. Only, she hesitated. Only what? The professor urged. Only, she began again. Only, now they will have to cut off their hair, too. What? The old man exclaimed. Then Alraune burst into laughter. Cut off their hair, but all together. More than I've done, right close to their heads. I'll write and tell them that I did it, and then they'll have to do it, too. Well, they'll certainly not be as crazy as all that, he objected. Yes, they will, she insisted. They will, too. I proposed that we all cut off our hair, and they promised to do so if I would only do it first. But I forgot it until you spoke about my hair. The privy councillor laughed at her. Of course they promised. What doesn't one promise? But that doesn't mean that they'll be so foolish as to actually do it. If you have been tricked, it's you who have been tricked. Alraune rose from her chair and came up to him. But they will, she whispered hotly. They will so do it. They know very well that I would tear every hair out of their bodies if they didn't. And they are afraid of me, even when I'm not there. She stood there, excited, trembling slightly. Are you so sure that they'll really do it? He asked. She answered with decision, yes, absolutely sure. Then he himself was convinced too, and strangely he did not even wonder at his complete conversion. What made you do it? He asked. At once she changed. All her queerness disappeared. She was only a wayward child. Well, she laughed as her small hands stroked. All right, let's start that again. Well, she laughed as her small hands stroked the thick strands. It's this way. After all, my heavy hair used to weigh me down dreadfully. Sometimes I had headaches from it, and then short hair goes well with my face. I know that, but the others will look ridiculous. Madame de Vintilen's senior class will look a sight. They'll cry, and Mademoiselle will scold. And the new Miss and the Fraulein will both cry and scold. Oh, it will be a riot. She clapped her hands and shouted with glee. Will you help me? She asked. How shall I send them? The privy councillor said, packed separately as samples of no value, and have them registered. She nodded. Fine, that will be great. And during the meal she described how the girls would look without hair. The tall, rangy Evelyn Clifford, who had fine flaxen hair, and the dark, buxom Louise, who always wore her hair up, and especially those two Rodenburg countesses, Anna and Andrea, whose long curls framed strong and bony Westphalian heads. And they'll all be cut off clean down to the scalp, she laughed. Oh, they'll look like a troop of monkeys. Every one will howl when they go through the walls, or the halls, all together. They returned to the library, where the privy councillor helped her find cardboard boxes, twine, sealing wax, and postage stamps, and he chewed away a cigar as he watched her write her letters. There were 7 little letters for 7 little girls in Spa. The old coat of arms of the Ten Brinken family was printed on the top of each sheet. John of Nepomuk, saintly protector against floods, was in the upper field. Below appeared a silver heron fighting a snake. The heron was the Ten Brinken's heraldic animal. He looked at her, and his old skin was stirred by a creeping itch. Old memories arose in his mind, lewd thoughts of half-grown boys and girls. Alraune here was both girl and boy at once. His saliva moistened his fleshy lips and soaked his black Havana. He blinked at her with small eyes trembling with desire, overrunning with passion. It was in that moment that he understood what attracted people in this slender little creature. They were like fishes who swim for the bait, unaware of the hook. But he could see the hook very plainly, and he calculated shrewdly that he would no doubt find his way to the bait while craftily avoiding the hook. Wolf Gontram was clerk in the Privy Councillor's office in town. His foster father had removed him from school just as soon as he had finished his first year and put him to work as apprentice in a bank. There he readily forgot all the stuff he had so painfully acquired at school, settled into his slow ways, and did just what he was told to do. When his apprentice years were over, the Privy Councillor took him over to his own office on the market square. His Excellency's office housed a queer business. Carl Monin, who was doctor in four faculties, was in charge, and his old professor was satisfied with his services. He was still forever looking for a rich wife, and wherever he went, he made new acquaintances which never led to anything. He had lost his hair long ago, but his nose was still working and could smell a good piece of business wherever he looked, either a wife for himself or a profitable deal for his chief. The only difference was that his matrimonial schemes always failed, while his financial affairs brought many a pretty penny into his Excellency's coffers. Two accountants managed the books not too carefully, but enough to inject a little order into the business. One room bore the sign Legal Business, and here King's Counsel Gontram and Herr Manasse, who had not been promoted yet and was still a plain lawyer, were in the habit of foregathering for a few hours now and then. They took charge of the Privy Councillor's endless suits, the number of which increased faster than they could be disposed of. Manasse was usually assigned to the hopeful ones likely to end in a victory, while Gontram took charge of the bad ones, and after innumerable postponements never managed to reach anything better than settlement by compromise. Dr. Monin had his private office too, in which he kept Wolf Gontram, for he liked the young man and sought to protect and develop him in his own peculiar way. This citizen of the world knew a great deal. In knowledge he was second only to the little Manasseh, but he never let it exercise any effect on either his personality or his actions. His knowledge was a dead collection that he had stored away even as a schoolboy gathers stamps, because his friends gathered them too. His collection lay thrown away in some drawer and was never brought out until someone specially requested something. Then he would pull out his album, open it up, and say, "There you are, the three from Saxony, read." Something in Wolf Gontram attracted him. Perhaps it was the big black eyes that he had once loved when they still belonged to Wolf's mother, whom he had loved, well, at any rate, just as deeply as one who had loved 500 other eyes could possibly love. But the further removed he was from his loves, the more deep and passionate they seemed. Time was a magnifying glass through which it appeared he had really been Frau Gontram's most intimate friend, though not once had he even dared to kiss her hand. But Wolf Gontram accepted verbatim all the tales of love affairs that Dr. Monin told him. To the young lad he was really the dangerous Don Juan that he would so have loved to have been. Dr. Monin chose the boy's clothes, showed him how to make a bow tie, and taught him elegance of manners, at least as far as he understood them. He lent him books, took him to the theater and to concerts, if only that he might not lack a grateful audience for his small talk. He considered himself a cosmopolite, and he wished to see Wolf Gontram grow up likewise. and it cannot be denied that the Gontram boy had to thank Dr. Monin for everything that he later became. The latter was the kind of teacher he needed, one who never demanded anything, and who gave of himself unstintingly every day, almost every second, and who cultivated him without his even being aware of it, which is the only way. Thus, Wolf Gontram developed character. That he was beautiful every one in the city would see, and did see, all but Dr. Monin, for he had never thought of beauty in any other connection than when it was accompanied by a skirt. Everyone else, however, was struck by Gontram's beauty. Even when he still went to school, old gentlemen would turn to look at him, pale officers would gaze after him, and many a beautifully modeled head with drawn features from which suppressed longings cried out, would sigh, and at once strangle an ardent wish. Then came the glance from beneath veils and hats, and the growing youth's walks were followed by the eyes of women. What the hell, little Manas muttered, as he was sitting with the king's council and the latter's son in the park listening to the concert. If she doesn't turn her head back soon, it will freeze there. Who is that? The king's council asked. Why, who else but Her Royal Highness? The lawyer exclaimed. Look over there, colleague. She's been staring at your boy for the last half hour. What difference? The king's council answered calmly, but little Manas would not desist. Come, sit over here. Wolf, he commanded, and the boy obeyed, and presented his presented his back to the princess. The little lawyer was frightened by this beauty, which he took for a mask like the one Wolf's mother had worn, and behind which he always used to hear death laughing, and that pained, no, tortured the lawyer until he grew to hate the lad as much as he had once loved the mother. It was a strange hate, and took the form of wishing that the fate that was so surely hanging over young Gontram's head would drop finally, today rather than tomorrow, and put an end to this nerve-racking delay. The lawyer felt that this death would release him from his pain. Still, for all that he did what he could to prolong his misery by helping to make Wolf's life attractive and happy. When His Excellency Ten Brinken stole his father, Jesus, I can't read. Too tired to read. When His Excellency Ten Brinken stole his his foster child's fortune, Manas was beside himself. You're a fool, an idiot, he barked at the king's council, and would have liked to snap his teeth into the old man's calves, as his dear departed Cyclops would have done. And he demonstrated to the father every detail of the rascally way in which his son had been swindled. The privy councillor had taken over the vineyards and the fields that Wolf had inherited from his aunt, and had scarcely paid the market price for them. In addition, he had discovered 3 rich springs of carbonated water. Wait, it came carbonated? On that property. Is that even possible? Natural carbonated water? These he had piped and bottled, and was now reaping a big profit out of them. But it would never have occurred to us, the king's council replied calmly. Little Manas spat angrily. That made no difference. The property was worth 6 times as much today, and the old thief had deducted more than half from his price as payment for the boy's upkeep. It was a plain, filthy trick. All this made no impression whatsoever on the king's council. He was so good, so full of warm goodness, that he could never see anything but good in other people. He always managed to detect some remnant of good even in the ugliest deeds of the lowest criminals. Thus he appreciated the councillor's appointment of Wolf to his office force as though it were a most unusual act, and as his trump card he produced a hint from the councillor that Wolf would appear in his testament. What? He'll do that? The lawyer grew red as a beet with suppressed rage and madly tore at the stubbles of his beard. Why, he won't leave the boy a single copper. But the king's counsel closed the argument. Besides, no Gontram has ever suffered want as long as the Rhine has flowed. And there he was undoubtedly right. Since Alraune had returned, Wolfchen rode out to Lendernick every night. I really can't read. Since Alraune had returned, Wolfchen rode out to Lendennick every evening. Dr. Monin had procured the lad a horse through the intermediary of his old friend Count Geraldingen. Geraldingen? Geraldingen, the cavalry captain. The young man had also studied dancing and fencing upon the insistence of his mentor. A man of the world, Dr. Monin explained, simply had to know these things, and he gave lurid examples of wild rides at night, victorious duels, and splendid triumphs in ballrooms, although he himself had never climbed upon a horse, had never stood before the point of a foil, and could scarcely execute a step properly. Wolf Gontram first stabled the count's horse, then he crossed the court to the main building. He always brought a rose, a single one, as Dr. Monin had taught him, but it was always the most beautiful rose to be found in town. Alraune ten Brinken took his rose and slowly plucked it to pieces. This took place every evening. She would fold the leaves into little pouches, which she would then crush against his forehead or his cheeks. Those were the favors with which she honored his mute adoration. He did not ask for anything else. He sat there and dreamt, and his dreams did not even take the shape of formulated wishes. They were mere vague longings that spun round him like clouds of thin smoke. Wolf Gontram followed his beloved around like a shadow. She still called him Wolfchen, as she had done when they were children together. It's because you're such a big doggy, she explained. Just a big, dumb, and faithful animal. Black and furry and beautiful, and with deep, trusting, puzzled eyes. Yes, that's why. Because you aren't good for anything else but following someone about, carrying a bag in your mouth. She would make him lie down before her stool, and she would put her dainty feet on his chest. She would stroke his cheeks with her doe-skinned shoes. Then she would cast them off and poke her toes between his lips. Kiss me, she would laugh. Then he would kiss every inch of her silk-clad foot. The privy councillor eyed young Gontram with a sour smile. He was as ugly as the youth was handsome. He realized that deeply. He wasn't afraid that Alraune would fall in love with the lad, but the boy's constant presence was annoying nevertheless. He needn't come out here every night, he growled. Oh, yes, he must, Alraune replied, and Wolfchen came. Then the professor thought, very well, my young fellow, swallow the hook, if you insist. That was the situation. Alraune was the real mistress of the Ten Brinken estate, and she had assumed that position the very first day she had returned from school. She was the mistress, and yet she remained a stranger, an intruder, an alien element unrelated to the other plants, beasts, and men that had their roots or drew their breath here in this old region. To the servants, the maids, the coachman, and the gardener, and even to the villagers, she was always Miss Ten Brinken, as though she were some relative or friend come for a short visit, but Wolf Gontram they called the young master. The clever privy councillor noticed it at once and was pleased. The people are aware that she is of a different nature, he wrote in the leather-bound volume, and animals sense it too. Yes, the animals too, not only the horses and the dogs, but also the slender deer in the garden and the squirrels in the trees. They were friends with Wolf Gontram. When he came into the garden, they lifted up their heads and approached, but they slunk away quietly just as soon as Alraune came near. Her influence, the professor noted, does not go beyond mankind. Animals are immune. It thus appears that he counted the peasants and servants among the beasts. No doubt, he reflected, they have the same healthy instincts which prompt them to an unconscious aversion which is half fear. She may well rejoice that she was born in this day and not 5 centuries ago. Then she could not have lasted a month in this village of Lendennick, without being accused of witchcraft and furnishing the bishop a roast. This antipathy toward Alraune delighted the old gentleman almost as much as did the strange attraction she exercised upon the members of higher levels of society. He constantly observed new examples of this sympathy and this hatred, although exceptions were to be found in both camps. From these entries by the professor, it appears certain that he was always persuaded that there was something mysterious in Alraune which was capable of exercising a sharp and definite influence upon her surroundings. It was therefore natural that the professor should seek to gather and set forth such events as seemed to support his theory. Thus, his tale of Alraune's life is not so much the record of what she did, as it is the story of what others did under her influence. Alraune's life, the professor thought, can be read as it is reflected in the lives of others. She actually seemed to him somewhat of a phantom, a schematic affair, a shadow creature that could not live of itself, but by radiation of ultraviolet rays caused events to take place outside of itself. And it was only by this external activity that it assumed form. The professor so cherished this idea and entangled himself so deeply in it that upon occasion he was led to believe that Alraune was not at all a human being, but a total unreality, and he often spoke to her as though she were a bloodless doll which he had fashioned, and to which he had but lent a mask. That flattered his old vanity, but it was this that was the primary cause of all that happened through Alraune's agency. And so he polished and prettied up his doll more and more beautifully every day. He allowed her to be mistress at Lendennick, and himself bowed to her dictates and whims, even as all the rest did. But there was this difference. He believed that he was really leading the game. He was firmly convinced that ultimately it was only his own will that was externalizing and manifesting itself through the medium, Alraune. And that's going to be the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 will obviously follow. Oh, wait, I didn't even see the skull. I don't know how I saw through that, but what's this? Bunch of. Oh, they're being clasped in his hands. I was like, why are they all bunched together? Death has them. Death has them, bruv. Let's see how long this chapter is. No way I'm reading it. I'm way too tired to read anymore, but we'll see how long it is. Hey, look, perfect timing, buddy. Thanks for the heat, Satan. Where the hell is the next chapter start? This looks like a long ass chapter. Unless I missed it. Jesus, there's no way. Oh shit, I just ripped the page. So 196, 26 page chapter. 25 page chapter. No. Anyway, there's a preview. And that's it. Anyone got any wisdom to share on this? Or no one cares? Jug of water's going. Alright. No one's got anything to say, that's all. Goodbye, Browns.